Good morning, hello, and welcome to this first in a series of webinars from Soapbox. Where we'll be discussing the role of AI and intelligent service automation in the domain of service management, and more specifically, customer service management. I'm your host, Paul Heath. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Soapbox, and I'm joined by Dion Williams, Soapbox CEO in Sydney. First, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time. Today is going to be a fairly short session. We'll try and keep it to 30 minutes. We'll allow some time for the questions at the end, and if we don't get to all those questions, we'll try and get back to everyone at the end of the session. Today's agenda, I'm shortly going to hand over to Dion. He's going to walk us through his thoughts on how AI is set to disrupt the customer and IT service management industry. We'll then walk through a demonstration of our Sofi Intelligent Automation solution for ServiceNow, followed by some thoughts on how you can get started on your own AI journey, and then we'll take some questions and wrap up from there. If you do have any questions that you want to raise during the webinar, please use the Q&A feature on the webinar panel, and we'll try and get to as many of those as possible. So with that, I'll pass over to Dion.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to those colleagues of ours that are joining us from the US. Thank you for the opportunity to step you through what we've been up to in the AI space, and more particular working on the ServiceNow platform. A bit of background for context: Paul and myself have been involved in the ServiceNow domain for many years, dating back to 2007. And having established the first ServiceNow partner here in Australia, we exited that business through a trade sale in 2015, and kind of got together and looked at the market and said, where do we feel the next opportunity is? Through that discovery process, we started looking at machine learning, AI, deep learning, which was becoming more topical, certainly not as topical as it is today, and really try to understand how could we leverage these technologies that we believed would certainly be the next disruption to drive efficiencies and innovation in the customer service management domain. It's became apparent to us that it's a well-suited domain for leveraging these AI technologies that we kind of group together, but are made up of various disciplines, from natural language understanding through to machine learning and deep learning technologies, to really drive automation, but also to assist our knowledge workers. And we would see those knowledge workers as being the service desk agents. How do we help them be more efficient and effective at their work, reducing the time to handle these repetitive, low complexity tasks, but tend to be high volume? How do we start to automate and assist in driving efficiencies? So we certainly have a view that the service desk / customer service domain is a well-suited domain to leverage these technologies. We typically find that in this space, there's a high volume of repetitive type calls that are coming in. They tend to have a similar resolution diagnostic path that they follow, and therefore they lend themselves very well to being able to be automated. Just as an example, we're working with a large multinational managed service provider who recently contracted one of the big 4 consulting companies to come in and really understand the call types that they're receiving. They take on average 25,000 calls per day, and after a deep analysis of those calls, they were able to identify that across all those calls, 25,000 calls, they would typically fit into one of 20 bucket types or call types. So whilst it may seem at first pass that the variation and variety of calls are in the hundreds of call types, when you start to really drum it down and look at it from the characteristics of those calls, they can be grouped and varying from organization to organization, but there is a small subset of call types that you're able to identify, and then there's an opportunity to identify within those call types, how do we start to drive automation and efficiencies? And the benefit is really two-sided. There's a return on investment component, that's a quantifiable ROI to the business as far as cost versus benefit, cost saving. And then there's also the other aspect, which is all around the user experience. So as an end user, my call's being solved quicker, more calls are being solved at first contact, and as a consequence of that, I have a far better service experience. So we certainly see that the space that we're operating is set to be disrupted. We've taken a very pragmatic approach in delivering tangible outcomes of how do we actually now bring together AI and the business problem and deliver a tangible outcome. And Paul will step us through today on exactly how and what it is we're going to be doing in that. If we have a look very quickly of how do we visualize these challenges that the business have, is we see there's increasing call volumes relating to the business going through digital disruption. More services are being offered through the business, be that internally to the users or be that externally to the customers. We see that increasing operational costs, so a lot of offshoring, move the call centers offshore to lower cost labor markets. That does come with the pros and the cons as far as cost efficiencies, but often there's language barriers and customer service can be impacted, or quality of service, and ultimately this leads to a decline in customer satisfaction. What we certainly see if we look at a typical interaction is the customer reaches out to us either by phone, email, or a web form. There's somebody that says, how can I help you? That person is either highly informed or recently joined the service desk and therefore isn't as attuned to how to solve these problems. So a lot of tribal knowledge exists within these service agents, which is determined by how long they've been sitting on the service desk will determine the service experience. Ultimately, that could lead to the call being passed around to various resolver groups, trying to understand what the actual problem is, trying to understand who's the best resolver group to solve this problem, and ultimately from a customer perspective it's a poor service experience and it's costly to the business. So what we focused on with the Sofi product is ultimately how do we start to drive automation of those low-level tasks, highly repetitive tasks, and thereby reducing the costs, improving resolution times, and reducing the incorrect assignments, or the call bounce factor of how many times does this call move around before it lands with the correct group to actually resolve my issue. We're certainly not about replacing staff. It's really about empowering those service agents to be more effective in doing their tasks, improving call handling time, improving their productivity, reducing onboarding time. So the fact that I now have an augmented solution for the knowledge worker, I'm able to very easily have people come onto the service desk and not be expected to have 3 months worth of training to really understand how to handle these calls, and rather having the machine learning virtual agent like Sofi prompting and helping that service agent in resolving that call. And ultimately, from an end user perspective, the fact that you're able to resolve my calls faster is giving me a far better service experience. So Paul will step through for us and demonstrate the various touch points that we have within the Sofi product and how we're able to assist across that transaction of an end user, or either going via self-service or via contacting the service desk, and how we can improve that service experience and lower the cost. So on that, I'll hand back to Paul to take us through a production, or a demo system, should I say, that we have Sofi installed on, and really step you through some real-world examples of the kinds of things our customers are using Sofi to address. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Dion. So let's start by looking at how Sofi can reduce call handling times for service agents. Sofi appears on the ServiceNow interface as a floating widget. She's there primarily looking to analyze the input from a form, primarily the short description, natural language from a short description, and based on what has been learned from past interactions, attempts to make recommendations that may be relevant for this call. So these things may be how should a call be classified, how should it be assigned, what suggested responses from additional comments, which might get emailed to a customer, might save time and driving the resolution or the call capture, and ideally the resolution of the call. Really, our goal is to understand the intent and context of an incoming call based on the natural language and also who the caller is, where they're located, what kind of business services they use, and to try and provide guidance to the operator based on this learned collective experience of the organization. So you can think of Sofi having ingested all of the interactions every operator of every level in the organization has done to date, and then use that collective wisdom, if you will, to provide recommendations and to kind of level the playing field on the level of experience that a customer may find themselves engaging with when they reach someone on the service desk or a resolver group. So let's take a look at a simple example. Let's say a good old example of reset my password. As you can see, as I'm typing, Sofi has started to she's understood that there's something in that short description that she's aware of and has fired up, and this is configurable how Sofi behaves, but we find for new customers having it pop up as I'm typing is a good way of changing some of maybe the behaviors that customers do have or agents do have. And so what you're seeing here are 3 different recommendations that Sofi's providing. The first bubble up the top here is what we call our intelligent routing, and these are recommendations in this example of classification, category and subcategory, and assignment. And it's got a level of certainty around those recommendations based on the information that we've gathered over time. And we can apply that first recommendation or any of the other recommendations. And as we do that, we learn if someone is selecting a different recommendation, or even we change aspects of the recommendation, then Sofi will learn from that. And if we start to see trends and patterns emerging, then we'll start to change our recommendations. The other bubble on the left-hand side here is what we call intelligent response. So these are suggested responses that are driven by ServiceNow templates that we might want to apply. So in this case, password reset, here's a templated response that we might want to send back to the customer. We can just apply that, and that will auto-populate that comments field. And of course, standard ServiceNow configuration typically is that would then generate an email back to the customer. And then on the bottom, probably one of the most important pieces of recommendation that we can make, and that's knowledge. Now, you know that you can provide get access through ServiceNow knowledge by clicking this link, or maybe even inline, depending on how you configured your system. What we find is that that's often very much keyword centric, doesn't handle spelling issues, doesn't handle synonyms. And so what our search is able to do is to take the short description and apply some natural language processing to try and understand the intent and context of what the caller is asking about. And I can demonstrate this by providing some more information, such as it's an Oracle password. And you can see that search recommendation is changing. Also, the routing information has changed to now say Oracle support password reset. Because we've passed a predefined threshold, it's automatically set those fields. And back on the knowledge we're looking at may be coming from ServiceNow, but in this case, it's actually coming from a Confluence page as well. So a key aspect of what we do is refer to as federated knowledge. We're able to access third-party knowledge repositories as well as ServiceNow and make that available at the moment of need, both at an operator level, a resolver group, or even, as we'll show in a second, self-service to a customer. We can even handle spelling issues. Well, before I get to that, I'll just quickly show you a comparison of what the ServiceNow out-of-the-box knowledge search would do. If I click on this standard feature, you can see it's coming up, and it's not even giving me that Oracle knowledge. It's giving me a whole lot of stuff which doesn't appear overly relevant, apart from this one, and it's picking up the word keywords password reset more than likely. But if I change this and I'm, let's say I'm a terrible speller, you can see that the Sofi knowledge is still coming out with relevant information. It's still picking out the password and reset, even though we've spelled those words incorrectly. If I go to the ServiceNow knowledge again, you can see that it hasn't even picked up those password ones, so it's not doing that, even that basic spell checking. So that's one of the key benefits we see in this solution, is that there's really what we refer to as intelligent search to give more accurate and meaningful search results at the moment of need. So let's now move on to the second scenario, which is how Sofi can be used to drive the adoption of self-service and to reduce the burden and costs on the service desk by increasing level 0 support, as it's often referred to. So this is a standard out-of-the-box ServiceNow service portal that we've just branded up. And we're really driving towards the concept of a search-centric self-service experience. The user should be able to find the answers to what they're seeking by describing their request in natural language. And really, Sofi enables this by providing a powerful search capability combined with a virtual assistant to guide the customer to the most appropriate solution. So let's take a look at some examples to demonstrate what we mean by that. In this example, let's demonstrate how Sofi can help a customer reset a password by asking them some security questions. Now, these are typically things that you'd need an operator to do. They'd log a call, the operator would look on their profile and say, okay, well, you've got, in order for me to reset your password, I need to answer these questions. Even if there's a password automation tool, you typically would still need to validate the credentials of the customer. So let's have a go at this and see if we can reset our password. Log into email. So once again, we just type in natural language. Our natural language understanding engine understand the intent of what's going on here, which is understanding that there's an access issue and it's to do with email. So we've understand the intent. We've also understood the context, which is email in this case. So just asking us to confirm that it is indeed an access issue with email. And Sofi's now saying, okay, that looks like I know that email is related to a single sign-on system, and I've got some abilities to help you through that. Maybe it's a password reset request. Would you like me to do that? So let's go ahead and do that. And now, based on the information that's relevant to this user's profile, it's serving up from, in this case, from ServiceNow, from the ServiceNow user record, questions that need to be asked and answered. So let's see if I can remember these questions. What city? I think it was Boston, and New York. So as you can see, what we're trying to do is simulate the interaction that a customer may have with a service desk agent. And then it's gone through and simulated a reset of that password and then confirming whether or not they can still log in. And then we can also click on these suggestions or just type in natural language. And I can even use shorthand language to respond to Sofi. So let's have a look at another example. In this example, we're going to demonstrate how Sofi's natural language understanding and search capabilities can help direct a customer to relevant knowledge that may be useful to resolve an issue. So in a similar vein, let's do another password reset. We're not going to provide any specific information about what system needs to be reset. We're just saying, look, we need to reset a password. Sofi's understood that was the intent. We're just asking us to confirm which system are we trying to access. Let's say it's Salesforce, and I'm just going to misspell Salesforce just for fun. And you see that even though I've misspelled Salesforce, it has picked up that from a search result point of view that we are talking about a Salesforce password reset. These words are just highlighting some of the key phrases and words that we've picked up on. So doing that just intrinsic spell checking. And if we click on any of these, you can see that in some cases they're ServiceNow knowledge articles, but in this case it's just an external link to an article that might be useful. And this one this one is a SharePoint example. So once again, demonstrating that we can do that federated knowledge search not only at the agent level but also at the self-service level, and preserving the privileges that are in place on those knowledge systems as well, which is obviously a key importance. Let's try another example where we might want to explicitly direct someone to a piece of knowledge. So we've configured Sofi in this particular case to where there's an issue with logging into SAP, we're going to direct them to a specific knowledge article. And then Sofi is asking whether or not this happened. I'm just going to say no in this case, and we'll demonstrate how Sofi can help collect additional information that might be useful when logging a call with a service desk in order to resolve this, or maybe even support some automation. So in this case, it's saying, look, there's a number of reasons why you may not be able to access SAP. One of them could be password reset, but it also could be a locked session. So let's say, yeah, it's my locked session. Sophie then understands that we need to collect some information in order to quickly resolve this. And so once again, this is the type of information typically when someone logged a call with the service desk, they would then need to ask, okay, well, get back in touch with the customer and ask, what the session ID is, or collect some further information so they can then go back and do it. Increasing the delay time and increasing the contact time with the customer. So what Sophie's enables us to do is script all of that into a dialogue workflow and make sure that we're collecting that information at the moment that the customer engages with us. And then log a call in this case, or we could have, if we had an automation tool that would reset a clear SAP session, we could just pass that information and automatically clear that session. In this case, it's created an incident, and we can click on that as a customer. You can see here that Sophie has, the Sofi Agent Assistant has also popped up. It's automatically set the category, subcategory, and assignment group based on the Sofi classifier capability. It's automatically recommended some knowledge articles that might be useful. These might be different knowledge articles than a customer may get and might be useful in assisting the agent in resolving this call. And you can see that we're providing the information that we've collected from Sophie, and we've also included the chat log, which may be useful to help the agent resolve the issue. So once again, it's all about trying to, if we can get first prize is to resolve the issue through provision of knowledge or provision of a form. Second prize would be to collect enough information that when it does hit an agent, it gets to the right agent or the right group, and that agent has enough information to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. Two more scenarios we'll take you through. The next is looking at how we can use Sophie to manage high volume repetitive inquiries. In this example, an employee is calling in to the service centre wanting to know whether or not their expense claims are going to be paid. And if they're not paid in the next pay run, they typically get upset and they are given an opportunity to request an escalation. So this is an actual customer example that we work with, where there was a high volume of calls coming in simply asking the same question. And so by modeling this process through the Sophie dialogue builder, we're able to resolve or reduce a large number of these calls coming into the service desk. So let's have a look at how this would work. So once again, a user just types in natural language, what they're trying to do. All my expenses be paid this month, or something along those lines. Sophie understands that we're asking about an expense request, just asking us to confirm that. Yes, we are. Is it the most recent one? No, it's not. Let's say no. Sophie's then gone and queried ServiceNow and brought back the expense claims that are related to this user, the person logged in, and finding all the ones that have yet to be paid. So we can have a look at one of these and say, okay, oh, yeah, let's have a look at that travel New York. And Sophie's applying some logic to say, okay, well, based on the policy, this pay run is the next pay run is scheduled for the end of this month. Looks like you will be paid for these expenses next month. Is there anything else? So let's have a look at another example where, and it's not going to meet that payroll deadline. And I think it'll be this first one up here, travel to Knowledge 17. Hopefully my expenses haven't been paid for that event. And in this case, because we haven't met that payroll cutoff date, Sophie is asking the customer whether or not if they're okay for it to be made in the next pay run. And typically what's happening with this customer is they would say, this is not okay, and then they would call the service desk or they'd speak to the service desk agent and ask them to escalate this. So we're doing this on behalf of that service center. So, is there a reason? I need the cash. It's probably a good enough reason. And then it goes off and generates, in this case, an HR case record. That HR case record then has all the same information we were just showing you before. The last thing I want to do is just show you how our voice integration works. I'm just going to make a slight configuration change here. So Sophie is going to read out responses to me. Now this is great in situations where you've got assistance required for vision impaired people, but also you can imagine how this in another iteration of Sophie, we could be applying this in an iPhone type app or a mobile app to be completely voice interfacing into ServiceNow. So in this example, we're going to demonstrate how Sofi's natural language understanding can be used to extract intent and context from customers' input or their utterance or their voice in order to help streamline an ordering process. In this case, it's going to be a leave request. I need to take 2 days of family leave starting next Monday.
Hi Paul, I'm Sophie, your intelligent assistant. Would you like some help completing the form?
Yes.
Okay, I'll set the start date to July 17th, 2017. Your last leave day will be July 18th, 2017. Please tell me why you need this leave.
I'm tired.
Okay, I've got everything I need. Would you like me to submit this request now?
So you can see that, there's various ways that we can interface and interact with Sofi, and various ways that Sofi can interact with ServiceNow. In this case, a record producer or a form that we're helping to auto-complete. You could also imagine that we wouldn't even necessarily need to have the form on the screen in order to fulfill this. So that's the last thing that I wanted to demo, and I'm just noticing that we're almost out of time. So let's just wrap this up with a couple more points that we wanted to make. The obvious question that hopefully you might be asking is, how do we get started? How can you get started on your AI journey? Through the work we've been doing with customers, one of the key things that we need to identify for customers is what are the opportunities for automation? How do we know what the top end issues are that are causing a whole lot of demand, a whole lot of load on your service desk and your support teams? And we often find that anecdotally, people know, but they struggle to get the information out of ServiceNow because often the classification structures that are being used just aren't working well, or people are just classifying things incorrectly. So one of the things that we've found works really well is to load Sofi up onto a non-production environment of ServiceNow that has a recent replication of all your records, and use Sofi. One of the nice features of Sofi is an analytics engine that allows us, using our natural language engine, to classify the different types of calls that are coming in and be able to group those and cluster those into semantic kind of meanings, if you will, that says, okay, these seem to be system access related, these seem to be password related issues, these seem to be resolved by this knowledge article, these seem to be resolved by this action, and we're able to cluster those up and use those as input into some analysis that can then help drive a business case or a proof of concept to validate the technology. So, Sofi can be installed via an update set literally within a matter of hours into a non-production environment where we can learn from historical records, drive knowledge, classification, assignment recommendations. That literally happens in hours, and it really is only dependent on the size of your historical database of calls. We can then use that configuration to evaluate the Sofi Service Agent Assistant typically for incidents and requests, once again on a non-production environment, so agents can get a sense of how out of the box applicable the Agent Assistant can be, and specifically looking at the differences that our knowledge capability brings. So if you are interested in talking with us further about a trial of Sofi in one of your non-production environments, please give me a call. There are my details in the email, and I'll also follow this up with another email with a copy of the recording of this webinar. So now we've just got a couple of minutes for questions. I noticed we've had a few come through. I'll just pick one or two given the time. And the first one is, it looks like it's a good question for Dion. What are the typical benefits your customers are seeing from Sofi?
Thanks, Paul. So it's certainly, I think I touched on it at the start of the call, is the value proposition around the automation and improved customer service experience, and that's achieved on two fronts. It's really by allowing the service agents to be more efficient and effective at doing their job by providing them the right knowledge at the right time, or alternatively giving them recommendations on which template is best used in order to respond to this call, so it saves them from having to go in and type each time the specific responses when they are repetitive and reusable responses. And then also there's the economic benefit, which is the more calls that I can drive to self-service resolution, the lower the operating cost of my service desk environment. So there's the two sides of the equation. There's the economic benefit, and then there's the service experience that customers are seeing the benefits of.
Great, thanks Dan. I do notice we're pushed past our time, so I will wrap up now, just in the essence of everyone's schedule. And the questions that we have received, I'll generate a bit of an FAQ, and we'll send those out as a follow-up to this webinar. So thanks to everyone for joining us today. Hopefully we've provided some insights into the potential value of applying AI and intelligent automation into your ServiceNow platform. If you have any questions, please contact us, and we look forward to sharing with you some more information in future. Thanks, and have a good day.